Story 1. I was in school when it happened. Some classes turned on their televisions and saw everything happen live. My class was not one of them. This is neither the time nor the place for watching television. The time, morning of September 11th. The place, history class. Story 2. I was in a hotel getting ready to leave. I had the TV on but wasn't really watching it. However, when I saw the video of the plane hitting the tower, I thought it was a preview for a Bruce Willis movie. Story 3. I was at home getting ready to head out. As I headed to the firehouse, I was the emergency medical services captain at the time. I heard lots of talk on the radio, not sure what was going on. Got to the firehouse and turned on the TV. One tower was ablaze, and I stood there in awe. Then the other plane hit. I wanted to help. I immediately started packing an ambulance with any gear and equipment I could find. Called the chief and told him I wanted to take 2 guys and an ambulance to help. He was instructed to stand down and wait. It is a 3-hour drive on a normal day. It was very frustrating to watch events unfold and not be able to help. It was truly one of the most gut-wrenching days of my life. It is very vivid in my mind. I am 52 now, and it still hurts. My heart is in agony for all the families that were forever changed that day. Not to mention all the people who perished that day and in the years after as a result of the poisonous dust cloud from debris. Unfortunately, this event will be lost to time as all things are. Some will remember, some will forget. The only hope we can have is that it does not happen again. We are here for such a short time. It has always bothered me that there is so much hatred in this world of ours. Peace and love to everyone. Story 4. I was in my dorm room and saw it on television. Then I realized I could look out my window and see it with my own eyes. I ran to the top of a campus building and saw the smoke billowing out of the towers. We got freaked out by fighter jets scrambling over our heads and got off the roof. It was a terrifying time. Story 5. I was 24, working in an office building in Charlotte, North Carolina, browsing a Dave Matthews Band message board at my desk. Someone posted about it on the non-Dave Matthews Band side, and I checked the Drudge Report, which had like 2 articles only on the first page, and a frame grab of the burning tower from CNN. Everybody stopped working and went to the break room to watch it on the news. At about 11, they sent everyone home. Then, my girlfriend at the time spent the next 2 days glued to the TV. Story 6. Remember this day like it was yesterday. Senior year of high school in Brooklyn, New York. I was in a business entrepreneur class led by a teacher, Mr. P. We had access to computers in this class, and my classmate had CNN up. He started reading breaking news and then let the teacher know about the first plane. He then goes, "If we go outside, we can see the towers." That's exactly what we did. The entire class went outside, and you could see the plume of smoke in the distance. Where the high school was situated was near Manhattan Beach, so the Manhattan skyline was in the distance. We saw the second plane hit in the distance as well. We rushed back inside the high school where we were dismissed shortly after. Public transportation was suspended, so I remember the hour-long walk home. Came home and watched the rest from TV. My dad worked in Manhattan at the time, but he was uptown, so wasn't affected, thankfully. Wild day overall. Story 7. I was at middle school in the library studying for a test when a student came rushing in and yelling, "Some idiot flying a plane just hit the World Trade Center in New York City." We didn't know until later that it was American Airlines. Story 8. I was the building supervisor for American building maintenance at 2 World Trade Center on the 4 to 12 shift. My wife worked on the 89th floor of World Trade Center 2 for Keefe, Bruyette and Woods, an institutional investment banking firm. She woke me up and told me that 1 World Trade Center was on fire and you could almost feel the heat on the window of her office. I know the evacuation procedures because we practiced them. I told her to leave the building now because they were going to tell her to stay at her desk because wind alone can push debris all the way out on Church Street, so the fewer people on the streets, the better. Thankfully, even though my wife loves her job, she hates working, so she walked out. I told her to take the stairs, but thank God she didn't listen to me. She took the elevator to the 44th floor setback and then took the stairs. The second plane hit when she was on the 23rd floor stairwell. She fell down the stairs with about 8 or 10 other people landing on top of her and fractured her back in 2 places. It was the worst 45 minutes of my life when I couldn't get in touch with her when that second plane hit. I thought I had killed her telling her to take the stairs from 89. Her experiences are recorded in the audio diary of what some people experienced on September 11th. Story 9. I was sitting in the waiting room at my obstetrician's office, 8 months pregnant with my daughter. I was reading a magazine, although the TV was on, and when I heard the receptionist scream in horror, I jerked my head up to look at the television. I just remember a sinking feeling in my gut, knowing that my daughter would be born into a time of such turmoil and fear. Story 10. I was working at Hill Air Force Base in a back shop doing sheet metal repairs for AC-130. One of my coworkers was a retired military veteran. He told me this attack just opened a can of worms in the Middle East. How right he was. Story 11. I was a baby. My mom, on the other hand, was in Washington State with her disaster search dog, instructing with a few others when the planes hit. Nearly everyone started to scramble, trying to figure out how to get back because there were a ton of dogs and people from many task forces. I don't know exactly how, but my mom was able to get a ride with her partner, K9 Otto, and they were able to go back east and headed to the Pentagon. They were deployed for weeks, combing through the disaster, attempting to find pieces of the deceased to bring them back home. Otto is pretty well known and was one of the dogs featured. It's still crazy to see her and him versus what was left of the Pentagon. Story 12. I was getting ready for kindergarten. I was watching PBS Kids when all of the channels changed to footage of the first tower. I remember hearing my grandma gasp when the second one got hit. We watched it all unfold on the news. Every channel had something about it. I remember my grandma and my mom debating on whether or not they should send me to school. I'm Canadian, and the chances of something happening was basically nothing, but my family still insisted I stay home. Story 13. Walking into my advanced placement United States history class. The TV was on. Mrs. Norris said only, "Sit down and watch. History is on TV today." And we did. I still remember it like it happened yesterday. Story 14. Second period chemistry class in high school. The principal gave a long rambling update about what had happened over the intercom, and then we just went about the rest of our day with a super dark vibe. We didn't have access to a TV, so no one knew exactly what happened until they got home that evening. Story 15. I was asleep when the first tower was hit, but my dad woke me up and then I was glued to the news for the rest of the day. I had class that afternoon, which I did show up for, but only about a third of the students were there. The no-shows weren't docked for it, obviously, but those of us who were there got extra credit. Story 16. Sitting in Mr. Lanning's first period study hall, the teachers hurriedly wheeled in this large CRT television on an audiovisual cart just in time for us to see the second plane hit live. I remember him turning and staring at us with pure fear. 9 years later, after I got shot in Afghanistan, I was back home in New York on convalescent leave. I got a knock at my front door, and it was Mr. Lanning. We just stared at each other in stunned silence for a minute. My war began and ended in front of him. Story 17. I was trying to get to Los Angeles International Airport to catch a plane that crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. Got to the airport and was told the plane wouldn't be arriving and the airport was closing effective immediately. I spent the next week sleeping in the theater of the Westin Marquis. Story 18. My organic chemistry class was canceled, so we went to the student center and played Big Buck Hunter. On our way out of the center, we saw one of our professors who tried to explain what was going on but couldn't put it into words. I left school, went to the bank, and then home and sat in shock in front of the TV for the rest of the day. I remember trying to call my girlfriend, now wife, because she was in the city and the phones were all down, most likely because everyone was doing the same thing. Story 19. I was at work at a trading firm with a big open floor plan, doing whatever, and one of the traders said, "Hey, a plane just hit the World Trade Center." We were mostly like, "Whoa, that's crazy. Nice piloting, bro," and kept working. Then a bit later, he said, "Hey, another plane just hit the World Trade Center," and everybody went nuts. Total shock and fear through the whole office. We were right across from the Sears Tower in Chicago, and there were rumors that the tower might be a target, so everybody was evacuated. I remember the loop was total mayhem. Trains were packed, and cell phone networks were so jammed up that phones were useless. Super scary train ride home. Half expected an explosion to flood the tunnels and drown us all. Such relief to make it home to my apartment and watch the footage, replayed over and over again in disbelief. Story 20. Deployed to Kuwait with the National Guard. Had just gotten off shift earlier that morning and was doing laundry when the first plane hit the towers. Not long after the plane hit the Pentagon, alarms started going off around the base. We grabbed our rifles and body armor, and I don't think we got more than 2 hours of sleep in a row for the next 6 weeks. Story 21. Holding my 16-hour-old daughter while caring for my post-operative wife in the hospital. It is surreal how joyful and painful this time is for us. She no longer speaks to us, so it hurts so much more now. Story 22. Teaching a middle school class at a private school in Virginia. My principal pulled me out to explain that the Pentagon was also hit. Some of our students had relatives who worked there, but I believe none of theirs passed away. Story 23. New Jersey office with view of New York City skyline. The sad part was listening to the radio and updating people in the office. One person was from Cantor Fitzgerald and worked in the World Trade Center. I have never seen someone turn instantly so pale when I said the first tower fell. Story 24. I worked on a trading floor in San Francisco. We were all gathered around the walls of monitors, watching live as the second plane hit, killing our employees at our sister office in Manhattan. The head of trading instructed me to immediately evacuate our San Francisco employees, saying that he wasn't waiting for a plane to hit the Transamerica Tower. Extremely surreal. Imprinted so deeply in my memory that I remember what I was wearing that day. Story 25. I was a graduate student and must have woken up around the time the first tower was hit because when I got out of bed and logged on, people were reacting online, and I turned the TV on just in time to see the second tower. I don't remember if classes were canceled or if we just didn't bother to go, but I spent most of the rest of the day watching the news at a friend's house and the remainder of the day writing the introduction to a collection of Mark Twain's essays about the nature of mankind. My first professional writing job. Felt like a surreal topic to have on my plate. Story 26. I haven't really posted much about September 11th over the years, but as I write this out, I'm struck by what was my very own close call. I've seen numerous accounts of people who were supposed to have been at the World Trade Center that day, but weren't there for various reasons. In many cases, very possibly saving their lives. I was in my apartment north of New York City getting ready to leave and go on the train into the city, and then the subway down near the World Trade Center for a meeting with restaurant associates, who I worked with, and had just finished up the United States Tennis Open in Flushing the night before. As I was walking out the door, I got a phone call to turn on the TV. It was a perfect crisp fall day with not a cloud in the sky. I could clearly see all the rising smoke and dust in lower Manhattan from the view I had standing on the roof of my building. I also lived just a few miles south of Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant, which was on the list of possible targets for September 11th. The first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, flew straight down the Hudson River. I lived right on the river overlooking the Tappan Zee Bridge. Just another hour more that morning and I would have been at the World Trade Center. Story 27. I recently graduated from college and was working in Washington, D.C. We woke up to the news of the first plane hitting the first tower. At that point, we thought it was just some pilot who had really made a mistake, so my roommate and I left for work as usual. Either by the time we got there or right after I arrived, the second plane hit, and we realized that something unprecedented was happening. We all gathered around to watch the coverage on my colleague's black and white TV that he happened to have in his office. It wasn't that long ago, but that's what he had. When we saw the news about the Pentagon, we raced up the stairs, which probably wasn't that smart in retrospect because we could see it from the roof of our building. We saw the building smoking and partially collapsed, although we could not see the plane. Family and friends were trying to get through to make sure that I was okay because they knew I worked close to the Pentagon, but so many people were calling that no one could get through. Everything shut down and our office closed. Luckily, one of the partners offered to drive me home because the metro had already shut down by then, and I was several miles from my apartment. The rest of that night, My roommate and our friends sat on the roof of our building in complete shock about what was happening. The next day, I flew to my aunt's house for Rosh Hashanah. The flight was not canceled, but you could count the number of people at the airport on one hand. I had a Swiss Army knife that I always carried with me that got through security with no problem, which I realized once I landed. The world had really changed from that day forward. I know it sounds dramatic to say, but it really marked a turning point. Edit. The details blurred together, so as someone pointed out below, I did not fly on the 12th. It was probably closer to the 14th or 15th, but there was still no one in the airports.